Chapter 6, Part 2. Science American 35 120. That's that the substance that fell at the Cape of Good Hope resembled a piece of anthracite coal more than anything else. It's a mistake, I think. The resemblance is to bituminous coal, but it is from the periodicals that we must get our data. To the writers of books upon meteorites, it would be as wicked, by which we mean departure from the characteristics of an established species, quasi-established, of course, to say that coal has fallen from the sky, as would be to something in a barnyard a temptation that it climb a tree and catch a bird, domestic things in a barnyard, and how wild things from forests outside seem to them, or the homeopathist, but we shall shovel data of coal. And if over and over we shall learn of masses of soft coal that have fallen upon this earth, if in no substance has it been asserted that the masses did not fall, but were upon the ground in the first place. If we have many instances, this time we turn down good and hard the mechanical reflex that these masses were carried from one place to another in whirlwinds, because we find it too difficult to accept that whirlwinds could so select or so specialize in a peculiar substance. Among writers of books, the only one I know of who makes more than a brief mention is Sir Robert Ball. He represents a still more antique orthodoxy, or is an exclusionist of the old type, still holding out against even meteorites. He cites several falls of carbonaceous matter, but with disregards that make for reasonableness that earthy matter may have been caught up by whirlwinds and flung down somewhere else. If he had given a full list, he would be called upon to explain the special affinity of whirlwinds for a special kind of coal. He does not give a full list. We shall have all that's findable, and we shall see that against this disease we're writing, the homeopathist's prescription availeth not. Another exclusionist was Professor Lawrence Smith. His psychotropism was to respond to all the reports of carbonaceous matter falling from the sky by saying that this damn matter had been deposited upon things of the chosen by impact with this earth. Most of our data antedate him and were contemporaneous with him, or were as accessible to him as to us. In his attempted positivism, it is simply and beautifully disregarded that, according to Berthelot, Berzelius, Close, Wörler, and others, these masses are not merely coated with carbonaceous matter, but are carbonaceous throughout, or are permeated throughout. How anyone could be so resolutely and dogmatically and beautifully and blindly hold out would puzzle us were it not for our acceptance that only to think is to exclude and include, and to exclude some things that have as much right to come in as have the included, that to have an opinion upon any subject is to be a Lawrence Smith, because there is no definite subject. Dr. Walter Flight, Eclectic Magazine, 89-71, says of the substance that fell near Arras, France, March 15, 1806, that it emits a faint bituminous substance. When heated, according to the observations of Bergolius and a commission appointed by the French Academy. This time we have not the reluctances expressed in such words as like and resembling. We are told that the substance is an earthy kind of coal. As to minute quantities, we are told that the substance that fell at the Cape of Good Hope has in it a little more than a quarter of organic matter, which in alcohol gives the familiar reaction of yellow resinous matter. Other instances given by Dr. Flight are carbonaceous matter that fell in 1840 in Tennessee, Cranbourne, Australia, 1861, Montauban, France, May 14th, 1864, 20 masses, some of them as large as a human head, of a substance that resembled a dull colored, earthy lignite. Gopura, India, about 1867, about 8% of a hydrocarbon. At Ornans, France, July 11th, 1868, substance with an organic combustible ingredient. At Hessel, Sweden, January 1st, 1860. Knowledge 4-134. That according to Dr. Daubry, that according to M. Daubry, the substance that had fallen in the Argentine Republic resembled certain kinds of lignite and boghead coal. In Comptes Rendus 96-1764, it is said that this mass fell June 30th, 1880, in the province of Entre Rios, Argentina, that it is like brown coal, that it resembles all the other carbonaceous masses that have fallen from the sky. Something that fell at Grazic, France, August 10th, 1885. When burned, it gave out a bituminous odor. Comptes Rendus 104-1771. Carbonaceous substance that fell at Rajpunta, India, January 22nd, 1911. Very friable. 50% of its solution in water. Records Geological Survey of India 44-PT point, I don't even know what that means. Survey of India 44.1-41. A combustible carbonaceous substance that fell with sand at Naples, March 14th, 1818. American Journal of Science 1-1-309. Science American Sup 29-11798. That, June 9th, 1889, a very friable substance of a deep greenish black fell at Mahi, Russia. It contained 5% organic matter, which, when powdered and digested in alcohol, yielded, after evaporation, a yellow resin. And this mass was 2% of an unknown mineral. Cinders and ashes and slag and coke and charcoal and coal. And the things that sometimes deep-sea fishes are bumped by. Reluctances and the disguises or covered retreats of such words as like and resemble, or that conditions of intermediateness forbid abrupt transitions, but that the spirit animating all intermediateness is to achieve abrupt transitions, because if anything could finally break away from its origin and environment, that would be a real thing, something not merging away indistinguishably with the surrounding. So all attempt to be original, all attempt to invent something that is more than mere extension or modification of the preceding is positivism, or that if one could conceive of a device to catch flies positively different from or unrelated to all other devices, up he'd shoot to heaven or positive absolute, leaving behind such an incandescent train that in one age it would be said that he had gone aloft in a fiery chariot, and in another age that he had been struck by lightning. I'm collecting notes upon persons supposed to have been struck by lightning. I think that the high approximation of positivism has often been achieved, instantaneous translation, residue of negativeness left behind, looking much like effects of a stroke of lightning. Someday I shall tell the story of the Mary Celeste. It's a boat, I think, properly. As the Scientific American supplement would say, mysterious disappearance of a sea captain, his family, and the crew. I was right. Of positivism, of, what the heck? Hold on. Give me a second. Of positivists by the route of abrupt transition, I think that Manet was notable, but that his approximation was held down by his intense relativity to the public, or that it is quite an impositive man, or that it is quite as impositive to flout and insult and defy as it is to crawl and placate. Of course, Manet began with continuity with Courbet and others, and then between him and Manet there were mutual influences. But the spirit of abrupt difference is the spirit of positivism, and Manet's stand was against the dictum that all lights and shades must merge away suavely into another and prepare for one another. So biologists like De Vries represents positivism, or the breaking of continuity, by trying to conceive of evolution by mutation against the dogma of indistinguishable gradations by minute variations. A. Copernicus conceives of heliocentricity. Continuity is against him. He is not permitted to break abruptly with the past. He is permitted to publish his work, but only as an interesting hypothesis. Continuity, and that all that we call evolution or progress is attempt to break away from it. That our whole solar system was at one time attempt by planets to break away from a parental nexus and set up as individualities, and failing move in quasi-regular orbits that are expressions of relations with the sun and with one another, all having surrendered, being now quasi-incorporated in a higher approximation to system. Intermediateness in its mineralogic aspect of positivism, or iron that strove to break away from sulfur and oxygen and be real homogeneous iron, failing inasmuch as elemental iron exists only in textbook chemistry. Intermediateness in its biological aspect of positivism, or the wild, fantastic, grotesque, monstrous thing it conceived of, sometimes in a frenzy of effort to break away abruptly from all preceding types, but failing, in the giraffe effort, for instance, or only charactering an antelope. All things break one relation only by the establishing of some other relation. All things cut an umbilical cord only to clutch a breast. So the fight of the exclusionist to maintain the traditional, or to prevent abrupt transition from the quasi-established, fighting so that here, more than a century after meteorites were included, no other notable inclusion has been made, except that of cosmic dust, data of which Nordenskjöld made more nearly real than data in opposition. So Proctor, for instance, fought and expressed his feeling of preposterous against Sir W. H. Thomson's notions of arrival upon this earth of organisms on meteorites. I can only regard it as jest, Knowledge 1-302, or that there is nothing but jest, or something intermediate to jest and tragedy, that ours is not an existence but an utterance, that Momus is imagining us for the amusement of the gods, often with such success that some of us seem almost alive, like characters in something a novelist is writing, which often to considerable degree take their affairs away from the novelist. That Momus is imagining us and our arts and sciences and religions, and it's narrating or picturing us as a satire upon the gods' real existence, because with many of our data of coal that has fallen from the sky as accessible then as they are now, And with the scientific pronouncement that coal is a fossil, how in a real existence, by which we mean a constant existence, or a state in which there is real intelligence, or a form of thinking that does not indistinguishably merge away with imbecility, could there have been such a row as that which was raised about 40 years ago over Dr. Hahn's announcement that he had found fossils and meteorites? Accessible to anybody at the time. Philosophical Magazine 4 17 425. That the substance that fell at Kaba, Hungary, April 15, 1857, contained organic matter analogous to fossil waxes, or limestone, of the block of limestone which was reported to have fallen at Middleburg, Florida. It is said that though something had been seen to fall in an old cultivated field, I'm sorry, that's Science 11 118. Like, I don't want to read those, but I feel like I have to read those. The little where the pages break, or the where the references are, because all this stuff that this guy is talking about is cited. It's not like he's making this shit up. So, whatever. This said, Science 11-118, that though something had been seen to fall in an old cultivated field, the witness who ran to it picked up something that had been upon the ground in the first place. The writer who tells us this, which the usual exclusion imagination known as stupidity, but unjustly, because there is no real stupidity, thinks he can think of a good-sized stone that had for many years been in a cultivated field, but that had never been seen before, had never interfered with plowing, for instance. He is earnest and unjarred when he writes that this stone weighs 200 pounds. My own notion, founded upon my own experience in seeing, is that a block of stone weighing 500 pounds might be in one's parlor 20 years virtually unseen, but not in an old cultivated field where it interfered with plowing, not anywhere if it interfered. Dr. Hahn said that he had found fossils of meteorites. There is a description of the corals, sponges, shells, and crinoids, all of them microscopic, which he photographed in Popular Science 20 83. Dr. Hahn was a well-known scientist. He was better known after that. Anybody may theorize upon other worlds and conditions upon them that are similar to our own conditions. If his notions be presented undisguisedly as fiction or only as an interesting hypothesis, he'll stir up no prude rages. But Dr. Hahn said definitely that he had found fossils and specified meteorites. Also, he published photographs of them. His book is in the New York Public Library. In the reproductions, every feature of some of the little shells is plainly marked. If they're not shells, neither are things under an oyster counter. The striations are very plain. One sees even the hinges where bivalves are joined. Professor Lawrence Smith, Knowledge 1-258. Dr. Hahn is a kind of half-insane man whose imagination has run away with him. Conservation of continuity. Then Dr. Wineland examined Dr. Hahn's specimens. He gave his opinion that they are fossils and that they are not crystals of ensteitite, as asserted by Professor Smith, who had never seen them. The damnation of denial and the damnation of disregard. After the publication of Dr. Wineland's findings, silence.